Welcome everyone. This is the MasterClass. My name is Patricknazareth. I have around 30 years of experience in teaching and I would like to help dispel your doubts should you have any. Today we look at the chapter The Adventure written by Jayant Narlikar. Jayant Narlikar was born in Kolhapur, Maharashtra in 1938 and he died recently on the 20th of May 2025. He was an Indian astrophysicist, a Padma Vibhushan awardee. He was the emeritus professor and founding director at the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics. He, along with Sir Fred Hoyle, developed the conformal gravity theory, also known as the Hoyle-Narlikar theory. He is known for developing a theory called the steady state, which is an alternative model to the more widely accepted Big Bang theory. He has authored very many popular science books and articles and has appeared frequently on radio. He was both a serious scientist and also a very talented writer who could explain complex scientific ideas through engaging stories. Have you ever wondered what might happen if you wake up one day and find yourself in a reality that is different from one you have known your whole life? We are introduced to Professor Gaitonde. He is going from Pune to Bombay on the Jijamata Express, which, as is told to us, is faster than the Deccan Queen. Since there are no industrial townships outside Pune at that time, we reach Lonavala in 40 minutes flat, and then you go to a Ghat section and continue down to Karjat. And after Karjat, it goes even faster to Kalyan. Why is Gaitonde going to Bombay? He is going to a library in order to study history, the best way of researching current state of affairs. He is also planning to go back to Pune and meet Rajendra Deshpande, who will hopefully be able to tell him exactly what has occurred. And then there's a line. That is, assuming in this world itself there is a person called Rajendra Deshpande. Now, if you are a person living in Maharashtra, if you are commuting between Bombay and Pune, if you have ever been that side, you will know that the fastest train between Bombay and Pune is the Deccan Queen. Where is the Jijamata Express come in? There are industrial townships outside Pune, but here there are none. So what happened to them? We get the first inkling that something is wrong, but it is made clearer to us at the end of the chapter for people who are not familiar with the state of Maharashtra. The train stops at a station called Sarhad. An Anglo-Indian is checking permits and his fellow passenger, a person who goes by the name of Khan, tells him this is the point at which the British Raj begins. Khan assumes that the author is going for the first time since he doesn't seem to be familiar with everything. The author says yes, it is factually correct. He is going for the first time. Why, we shall learn about later in the chapter. He continues talking with Khan Sahab and he asks him, how will you go to Peshawar? I will of course get off at Bombay. Khan Sahab informs him the train will stop at Victoria Terminus. From there he'll catch his frontier mail which will take him down to Delhi, Delhi to Lahore, Lahore to Peshawar. It will take him 2 more days. Khan Sahab then spoke a lot about his business and Gangadhar was a willing listener because he was able to understand something of the life in this India that was a slightly different India to one he had known. We are almost on the outskirts of Bombay and you see trains, blue carriages. On the side of them is written JBMR, the Great Britain Metropolitan Railway as explained by Khan. After Dadar, the train slows and we enter Victoria Terminus. The station is remarkably neat and clean. Who are the staff over there? Mainly Anglo-Indians, some Parsis, and a handful of British officers to oversee the smooth running of the station. As he comes out of the station, he finds himself in front of this building. And what do the letters say on the building? It says the East India Company. Gangadhar Pant did not expect this. The East India Company died in 1857. That is what history tells us. But it seems to be flourishing. What happened? He is going to the library to find out. He walked along Hornbill Road, as it was then called, and he saw different sets of shops and buildings to what he normally knew. There was no handloom house, for example, but there was a Boots, there was a Woolworth departmental store, offices of Lloyds, Barclays, and other British banks. It was as if he was transported to England. He turned right along Holmes Street and entered Forbes Building. Here he spoke to the receptionist. He would like to meet Mr. Vinay Gaitonde. The receptionist looks everywhere, through her records, through everything, and informs him that there is no person of that name present. Gaitonde again gets a shock. In other words, in this particular reality, his son doesn't exist. He thanks the girl he exists. He goes looking for the town hall. He goes looking for the library. He enters the reading room and he asks for a list of history books, including his own, which he had written. 5 volumes come on the table which have been written by him. He starts from the beginning. Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, all fine. In the 5th volume, he finds the difference. It describes how in the Battle of Panipat, the Marathas beat Ahmed Shah Abdali, and that changed the entire history of India. Gangadhar Pant realizes the writing is his, but he knows he has not written this particular volume. What happened when the Peshwas won the Battle of Panipat? Well, the 2 main heroes, Bhau Sahib and his nephew Vishwasrao, became very powerful. The East India Company realized that the emerging power were the Marathas. When Vishwasrao came to the throne, he, along with his brother Madhav Rao, displayed great political will. They expanded their influence, went all over India. The East India Company was reduced to pockets of influence. They only controlled Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. Just like, for example, the Portuguese controlled Goa and the French controlled Pondicherry. For political reasons, the Peshwas kept the Mughal Empire intact, but it was just a figurehead. Everything was under them. And they understood the importance of the technological age that was coming in Europe. They set up their own centers of science and technology. In order to make themselves proficient in it, they even took the help of the East India Company, just because they wanted to make themselves self-sufficient. What happened in the 20th century? India started moving towards becoming a democracy. The Peshwa kingdom had collapsed, had been replaced by democratically elected bodies. Even in Delhi, the Sultanate survived, but just like a figurehead. This there to rubber stamp the recommendations of the central government, like our president stamps the recommendations of the Prime Minister and the cabinet. Reading on, Gangadhar Pant developed an appreciation for the India he had watching. At least that India had not been subjected to slavery by the British. It had learned to stand on its feet. It had kept its self-respect. And because it was in a position of strength and for commercial reasons, it had allowed the British to continue in India and had allowed them to retain Bombay as their only outpost. It was given to them on lease, and the lease would expire in 2001 according to the treaty signed in 1908. What exactly happened in the Battle of Panipat? How did the Marathas win? He went through the books before him and he found one which gave him the clue. The Bhau Sahib Anchi Bakar, a historical text, not very reliable, but inside which you could find something of the truth. So when going through it, he discovered this particular line where Vishwas Rao entered a fight and the bullet just whizzed past his ear, missing him by a little bit. The author likens it to the thickness of a til seed, a sesame seed. Gaitonde is lost in his thoughts and the librarian reminds him, it's time for the library to close, you have to leave. So Gaitonde understands that and he says, look, I'd like to start again tomorrow morning. What time do you open? Can I leave my books over here? And the librarian agrees. In fact, he's happy that here was a researcher and a person who knew how to use the library properly, just like the librarian himself. The professor had been making notes and he pushed the notes into his pocket and absent-mindedly even pushed the copy of the Bakar into his left pocket. He found a guest house to stay in and set off in the direction of the Azad Maidan. There, a pandal had been set up. Obviously, a lecture was going to be done there. But as he went into the pandal, he realized the presidential chair was unoccupied. There was no chairperson. He at once moved on to the stage and sat down on it. There was a great outcry from the audience, asking him to leave the chair because they did not believe in presiding dignitaries anymore. Gaitonde did not listen. 999 times he had addressed audiences, and he was used to hostile ones. So he started telling them why they should always be a presiding chair. They lost control and they started throwing vegetables, eggs, whatever they could find it. Finally, they went up in a body to the stage to catch hold of him, but he had vanished. Now there is a transition. Apparently, Gaitonde has met with his friend Rajendra and tells him, look, this is what has happened. And when I woke up in Azad Maidan, I was back in our reality. So what exactly happened, Rajendra? Can you explain it to me? And Rajendra tells him, let me ask you a question. Before you collided with the truck, what were you doing? So he said, I was thinking about small things that can affect history. Rajendra said, of course, that's what I thought. Gaitonde tells him, listen, it's not what you think. I'm not hallucinating. And he takes out a piece of paper from his pocket. What is on that piece of paper? A page from the book he was reading, which explains how Vishwas Rao was saved from the bullet. And he pulls out a current copy, which says how Vishwasrao was killed by that bullet. Rajendra is dumbstruck, and then he explains it. He says there are two scientific theories known today. The catastrophe theory, if you apply it, if the bullet hit Vishwasrao, he lost the battle of Panipat. If it hadn't hit Vishwasrao, the battle would have been won. And what has happened over here? The second theory kicks in. So Rajendra explains to him about quantum physics using the electrons, and Gaitonde says, yes, of course I know that. If you fire a gun, for example, you fire it in the direction, you know the bullet is going straight or left or right, whichever direction you're facing, the bullet is going there. But if you fire an electron, it could go anywhere. You don't know where it is. It could go basically anywhere it chooses. Similarly, just like that, the catastrophe theory and the quantum theory together explain how different worlds could exist, different timelines could exist. One small thing can change an entire course of events. So we are existing on one particular timeline, but there could be multiple other timelines as well. How Gaitonde was able to go from one timeline to another timeline, from one world to another world, is something that cannot be explained. But he guesses, perhaps at that time, during the collision, you were thinking both of the catastrophe theory and its role in wars. Gaitonde says, yes, indeed, I was. Perhaps the neurons in your brain acted as a trigger when you were hit, and it pushed you into a different dimension altogether. But now you'd be attending your lecture, your 1000th lecture, and you would be able to tell them that you actually been a part of history or an alternate version of one. Gaitonde says, no, Rajendra, my 1000th address was on the Azad Maidan, no more. Gaitonde was a proud man, but now has been made humble. He has informed his organizers at the seminar that he will not be attending it anymore. The characters in the story then, Professor Gangadhar Pant Gaitonde. He's a 65-year-old historian who's intellectual, is curious, but he's also stubborn and proud. Rajendra Deshpande, Professor Gaitonde's friend, who is interested in science and physics. He helps the professor to understand his strange experience. Khan Saab, a fellow passenger on the train, the Jijamata Express, who helps Professor Gaitonde understand the alternate world that they are traveling through. The settings, Pune, from where Professor Gaitonde sets out, the Jijamata Express specifically, when he first realizes that he's in a different world. There is Bombay or Mumbai, the main city where most of the situation develops. East India House, which we see, the Asiatic Society Library at the Town Hall, Azad Maidan, where the lecture is taking place. What are the literary devices in use over here? Science fiction elements. We get told about parallel worlds, quantum physics, time travel concepts. Historical fiction. There are descriptions of alternate fiction, alternate historical events and their consequences. There is symbolism. The empty chairman's chair. It represents Professor Gaitonde's need for recognition and authority. Irony. An historian who studies the past actually gets to experience an alternate version of it. Foreshadowing. Early memories of catastrophe theory hint at what will happen later. Like we discussed, the Jijamata Express is faster than the Deccan Queen, for example. The first-person narrative. The story is told through Professor Gaitonde's experience, which allows us to experience everything through his eyes firsthand. The themes in this story: parallel worlds or alternate history. The story takes a look at what would have happened if history had changed at the Battle of Panipat. Science and reality. How beautifully the story mixes together historical facts and quantum physics theories to explain events that are impossible. There is identity and experience. Professor Gaitonde questions his own existence when he finds out his son doesn't exist in this world. Indian history and colonialism. The story imagines an India that was never fully colonized but maintained its independence. Pride and ego. Gaitonde's obsession with being a chairman shows how personal pride can be both a strength and a weakness. That's the end of the lesson there for you. I do hope I have been of help. If I have, do remember to like, subscribe and share. Remember, there might be others who would be requiring our help. Thank you so much for watching.